Imagine a country that scores an almost perfect grade for gender equality on a global scale. I mean, we are talking about a gender development index score of 0.969.
Yeah, which is an absolute A grade by any statistical standard. It's incredibly high.
Right. And in the grand scheme of global development, looking at the year 2023, it places this nation squarely in the middle of the pack globally. They rank, I think it's 100th out of 194 countries.
Right in the median.
Exactly. So on paper, when you look at that 0.969, it looks like a total triumph of modern social progress. It looks like a society that has just, figured it out.
It really does. It paints a very specific, very optimistic picture.
But then you step away from the spreadsheet and you actually look at its government. You look at the actual rooms where the laws are made, where the future of the country is decided.
And the reality is completely different.
It is jarring because for an entire decade, stretching from 1999 all the way to 2010, this exact same country had exactly 0 women holding seats in its parliament.
0%.
0. Not a single female voice in the national legislature for 10 straight years, all while looking like a gender equality model on the global scorecard.
It's a staggering contradiction.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at a mathematical triumph sitting right next to an absolute structural void.
Which brings us to the actual mission of today's deep dive.
Right, because we need to unpack how that is even mathematically possible.
You do. And we are doing that by looking at this fascinating, highly customized 15-page presentation outline that you, the listener, sent in for us to analyze.
And it is a brilliantly put together document.
Oh, it really is. I love the visual guidelines you set up for this. It's specifically tailored to transform raw data into a narrative. The design is it's incredibly stark.
Yeah, that pure white background, no distracting 3D graphics, just very clean, very minimal.
Exactly. Just using simple arrows and red circles to highlight the data. And the very first page of this presentation, it sets up what we are calling the Tuvalu human development paradox.
The hook on that first slide is so effective.
It really is. It literally has this giant bolded DRE-Live swipe 969 on the left side, and then on the right, there's just an icon of an empty parliamentary seat with a big red circle around a 0% marker.
And a red arrow pointing right to the core issue, saying, high index score does not equal structural equality.
Right. So the goal of this deep dive today is to answer the core question posed on that very first slide. Can standardized global development metrics, these, massive scorecards we use to judge human progress, can they truly and accurately measure the survival and the reality of a micro-island nation like Tuvalu?
And to do that, we have to follow the analytical framework laid out on page 2 of your presentation.
Yeah, let's talk about that framework because it's a very specific set of lenses we have to look through.
It is. The slide has this great mind map graphic, just simple gray lines branching out from the center, showing the 4 core UN metrics we're going to use.
So what are those 4 branches?
Well, we have the baseline, which is the Human Development Index, or HDI. Then we have the Gender Inequality Index, the GII.
Okay, got it.
And then the Inequality-Adjusted HDI, and finally the Planetary Pressures-Adjusted HDI, or PHDI.
So we are basically taking this one tiny island nation and examining it under 4 different mathematical microscopes.
Exactly, because as we swap out these lenses, the image of Tuvalu is going to shift in some really, really unsettling ways.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the baseline, right? The macro trend.
Yes, slide 3 of the presentation covers this perfectly. Before we can understand Tuvalu, we have to establish what the rest of the world is doing.
Right. We need the global context.
So we look at the global tide of human progress over the last 3 decades. From 1990 to 2023, the global HDI made a historic leap.
And the visual here is just a smooth, upward-sloping line chart.
Yeah, a simple curve. It climbs steadily from an average score of 0.60 to 0.756.
Which, I mean, to a layperson, moving from 0.60 to 0.756 sounds like a tiny decimal shift.
It sounds small, but in the context of this specific index, that is a massive, monumental jump.
Because the index isn't just a random number, it actually measures, real-life stuff.
Exactly. The HDI was created because economists finally realized that just measuring a country's gross domestic product, its raw financial wealth, wasn't telling us if the people living there were actually thriving.
Right. Money doesn't equal a good life automatically.
Exactly. So the HDI averages together 3 fundamental pillars: a long and healthy life, access to education, and a decent standard of living.
Health, knowledge, and income.
Right. So when that global average climbed from 0.60 to 0.756, It represented billions of human beings seeing genuine, measurable strides in how long they live, how long they stay in school, and how much money they make.
The whole world was basically leveling up.
Yes, the global tide was rising rapidly.
But then we move to slide 4, and we bring the focus back to Tuvalu. And the presentation uses this dual-axis chart to show something really frustrating.
The paradox of growth.
Yeah, because on paper, Tuvalu is growing alongside everyone else. Its absolute HDI jumped from 0.566 back in 1990 to 0.689 in 2023.
So the bar chart shows them objectively improving.
Right, if you just look at that growth, you'd think, hey, great, policy is working, they are developing, but then you look at the right side of the chart, the line showing their global rank.
And the line is just flat.
It's completely flat. Despite that absolute growth, Tuvalu's global ranking hasn't really budged. The presentation highlights this with a big, solid box around their 2023 rank.
Rank 135 out of 203 countries.
Right. They have been languishing around the 130s for years. It's like they're sprinting on a treadmill just to stay exactly where they are.
And that is the harsh reality of global metrics. It is entirely possible to be moving forward. Your people are living a bit longer, they have a bit more money than 10 years ago.
Sure, absolute progress.
But when the entire world is moving forward at the exact same time, moving forward slowly actually means you are falling behind, comparatively.
Because your rate of progress simply cannot keep pace with the global average.
Precisely.
It makes me think about a listener's own career trajectory.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Right. Imagine you are in a highly competitive industry. You're, I don't know, taking night courses, you're improving your skills, learning a new programming language.
You're doing everything right.
You genuinely are getting better at your job year over year. Your absolute skill level is rising. But if the rest of the market is adopting artificial intelligence and advancing their productivity twice as fast as you are,
then your absolute skills have improved, but you are losing your competitive edge.
Exactly. You are actually falling down the ranks of your profession, even though you are technically better than you were yesterday.
That is exactly what is happening to Tuvalu. And in the context of a micro-island state, that lag isn't just about economic competitiveness.
It's way more serious than that.
It is an existential vulnerability. The rest of the world is accelerating because of economies of scale, massive infrastructure investments, digital revolutions.
And Tuvalu is literally a coral atoll.
Right. Geographic isolation acts like a permanent friction on their development speed. You cannot build a massive manufacturing hub or a bullet train on 26 square kilometers of coral.
Which brings us to slide 5, and the absolute core of the research you sent us. To understand exactly why that friction exists, we have to stop looking at the overall composite score.
We have to look under the hood.
Yes. We have to deconstruct it into its 3 fundamental pillars. Let's start with the first one, health.
And this is where the data gets immediately alarming.
It really does. The slide uses a dumbbell plot to show the life expectancy gap. The global average life expectancy in 2023 is 73.3 years.
A solid number.
But Tuvalu is trailing significantly. Their national average is 67.1 years.
Which is a 6-year gap.
Yeah.
That is substantial when we were talking about a national average.
Right, because it represents a heavy toll in terms of public health outcomes and overall mortality.
But here's the thing about national averages. They are deeply flawed metrics if you actually want to understand societal dynamics.
Oh, absolutely. Looking at a national average is like looking at the average temperature of a house where, the kitchen is on fire and the bedroom is freezing.
Exactly. The average temperature might seem totally fine.
Right, it says 70 degrees, but it completely hides the fact that one room is burning down.
And that is the crucial pivot in the data on the slide. When we pull that 67.1 life expectancy apart by gender, we see a shocking internal divide.
The dumbbell plot illustrates it perfectly with this double-ended arrow.
Right. Tuvaluan women have a life expectancy of 70.69 years.
So they are actually pulling that national average up quite significantly.
They are. But Tuvaluan men, they are living drastically shorter lives. Their life expectancy is only 63.765 years.
That is almost a 7-year gap between men and women living on the exact same tiny island.
It's a massive hidden trough of male mortality.
Now wait, I want to pause and push back on this for a second, because we started this deep dive talking about a paradox in gender equality.
We did.
If the women are living 7 years longer than the men, shouldn't we consider that a massive victory for women's health? Like, why are we framing their longer lifespans as part of an illusion of a score? A longer life is a tangible, undeniable benefit.
It is absolutely a tangible benefit for those women.
Yeah.
And you're right, it does reflect genuine successes in things like maternal health and general care.
Right, so it's a good thing.
It is a good thing for the women. But the issue is why the gap exists. It is not that women in Tuvalu are experiencing some miraculous health utopia compared to the rest of the world.
Okay, so what is it?
It is that the men are dying prematurely at an alarming rate. And when a global index uses the gap between men and women to measure equality, a severe male health crisis can mathematically masquerade as female empowerment.
Oh, wow. Okay, that is fascinating and honestly deeply concerning.
Because the math just sees a gap that favors women and it says, great, points for equality.
Without asking why the men are dying. So what is the mechanism here? What exactly is killing men 7 years faster in a population that shares the exact same 26 square kilometers of land?
It really comes down to the severe realities of geography, occupational hazards, and a really rapid forced cultural shift in lifestyle.
Okay, break that down for me.
Well, in many Pacific microisland nations, the labor market is highly segmented by gender. Men are disproportionately engaged in high-risk physical labor,
Like what?
specifically offshore fishing and seafaring.
Ah, and when you are on a remote atoll, the concept of a workplace injury takes on a totally different meaning, doesn't it?
Precisely. If you are injured on a fishing vessel hundreds of miles from the mainland, or even if you suffer a severe injury on the island itself,
You can't just call an ambulance.
exactly, you are thousands of miles away from tertiary trauma care.
Right.
So a complex fracture or a severe laceration that would be routinely treated in a major global city, with a quick surgery.
It can easily become fatal in Tuvalu?
Yes, simply due to the sheer logistics of medical evacuation. Isolation makes every single accident exponentially more dangerous.
So there is a baseline occupational mortality that heavily skews male.
Yes. Much more insidious mechanism.
Which is?
The crisis of non-communicable diseases, or NCDs.
Okay, meaning what exactly?
We are talking about cardiovascular disease, adult-onset diabetes, and hypertension.
Ah, diet and lifestyle.
Exactly. Over the last few decades, places like Tuvalu have experienced a forced dietary transition.
Forced how?
Well, historically, the local diet relied heavily on fresh fish and local agriculture, specifically root crops like taro.
Very healthy, very sustainable.
Right. But as climate change accelerates, rising sea levels are increasing the salinity of the soil.
The salt water is seeping into the ground.
Yes. And because of that, growing traditional crops becomes incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible.
So the land literally stops producing food because there's too much salt in the groundwater.
Exactly. So what replaces that local food?
They have to import it.
Right. Highly processed imported foods, canned meats, refined carbohydrates, sugary beverages.
Because those are the foods that can survive a long, hot journey on a slow cargo ship.
Exactly. You can't ship fresh spinach for weeks across the Pacific easily or cheaply. So this massive shift to processed foods has devastated public health across the entire Pacific.
But wait, wouldn't that dietary shift affect everyone, men and women?
It does affect everyone, but behavioral data consistently shows that men in these environments tend to have higher rates of tobacco use, higher alcohol consumption, and much worse dietary adherence.
I see.
So when you combine high-stress physical labor, a sudden influx of highly processed foods, and extremely limited access to preventative health care.
You create a perfect storm for premature cardiovascular failure in adult men.
Precisely.
So the UN metric looks at this reality. It just sees a number. It sees that women are living to almost 71 and men are dying at 63.
Right.
And because the metric is inherently designed to measure how women are doing compared to men, it inadvertently interprets this horrific male health crisis as a mathematical advantage for women.
It does.
That is incredibly dark.
It is a profound flaw in taking the index at face value. But if we look at slide 6, the narrative shifts again. We move to the second pillar of human development.
Right. We move from health to education. And this was honestly the most surprising data point in the entire presentation you sent us.
It's a real bright spot.
The visual here is a minimalist stacked bar chart comparing Tuvalu to the global average. And it shows that education is the one single area where Tuvalu is actually holding its own against the rest of the world.
They are doing incredibly well here.
The data shows Tuvalu's expected years of schooling in 2023 hit 12.375 years.
And if we compare that to the global average, which is 13.04 years, you can see how remarkable that is.
The slide highlights it with a dashed line showing the gap is less than a single year.
Less than 1 year of difference.
Wait, I really want to emphasize this. They are on a remote micro-island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and the gap between them and the global average for getting kids into classrooms is less than 1 year.
It's virtually neck and neck.
How is that even logistically possible?
It is a profound achievement, and it speaks to an intense, dedicated societal and governmental commitment to human capital.
It has to be so difficult to maintain.
I mean, think about the logistics involved in that. Maintaining a modern educational system on an atoll requires importing absolutely everything.
Textbooks, laptops.
Desks, laboratory equipment, whiteboards, everything has to come on a ship.
Right.
It requires maintaining internet connectivity via incredibly expensive satellite links or undersea cables.
You can't just run a fiber line from the next town over.
Exactly. And it requires training teachers, often having to send them abroad to Fiji or Australia or New Zealand for higher degrees, and then hoping they actually return to teach on the island.
It's almost like they realize that because they have literally no physical resources, no timber, no oil, no vast agricultural plains to farm knowledge, it's practically their only exportable resource.
That is exactly the mindset. It is a massive investment in resilience.
Resilience against climate change.
Yes. When your physical landmass is actively threatened by rising sea levels, investing in the minds of your citizens is the most portable form of wealth you can possibly create.
You can't take the island with you, but you can take your degree.
Exactly. This solid educational foundation is the primary engine that is keeping Tuvalu's overall HDI from completely collapsing.
Wow. Okay, and this is where the story takes a really harsh turn, and we look at slide 7.
The economic anchor.
Yeah, because education without economic opportunity creates a very specific, agonizing kind of structural frustration, which brings us to the final pillar of the HDI metric, income.
And this is where the geographic realities we just discussed create an absolutely impenetrable wall.
The visual on slide 7 just makes you wince. It's this horizontal bar graph with extremely strong length contrast.
It's very stark.
The global gross national income, or GNI, per capita in 2023 reached a staggering $20,327.
Right, that's the long gray bar.
Yeah, stretching all the way across the screen. And then Tuvalu's GNI per capita, a mere $7,005.
It is a devastating shortfall.
The slide has this vertical dashed line that drops down and literally chops off Tuvalu's bar, explicitly pointing out that their income caps out at just 34% of the global length.
They are making roughly 1/3 of the global average.
Despite having the same education.
Exactly. And we have to analyze why this economic ceiling exists despite their high levels of education.
Let's do it. Why are they so poor when they're so educated?
It comes right back to the unforgiving reality of micro-island geography. Tuvalu's total land area for the entire country is about 26 square kilometers.
That is so small.
To put that in perspective, that is roughly the size of a medium-sized international airport.
The whole country.
The whole country.
Yeah.
So you simply cannot have diverse, large-scale industries.
Right.
There's zero manufacturing base. There are virtually no natural resources to export.
Well, I do know they lease out their internet domain name, .-TV, which is honestly a brilliant bit of digital real estate.
It is, and it provides crucial sovereign revenue for the government. It's very smart. But leasing a domain name doesn't create thousands of high-paying, white-collar local jobs for a highly educated population.
Right. The money goes to the government, but it doesn't give a college graduate a job on the island.
Exactly. Furthermore, they're incredibly vulnerable to what the UN calls planetary pressures.
Meaning climate change.
Climate change, yes, but also just the friction of distance. The costs of importing goods are astronomical due to supply chain distances.
Because literally everything has to be shipped across the ocean.
Yes. Every drop of diesel fuel to run a generator,
Yeah.
every single piece of machinery, every bag of cement for construction has to be shipped in.
And when you factor in the active threat of climate change, it must absolutely terrify foreign investors.
Oh, completely. Foreign direct investment is severely suppressed. If you are an international company, you are extremely hesitant to build expensive physical infrastructure on land that might literally be uninhabitable due to sea level rise in a few decades.
It's too high of a risk.
Way too high.
I want you, the listener, to really internalize this connection. Just imagine sitting in a classroom, putting in all the hours, studying for the exams, and getting almost the exact same number of years of education as your peers globally.
You're doing the work.
You hold up your end of the social contract, you get the knowledge, but because of where you were born, strictly because of the structural and geographic restrictions of your home, you are condemned to making 1/3 of their salary.
Structural entrapment.
The return on investment for all that education is completely broken by the geographic reality of the island.
That is the core of the economic anchor dragging Tuvalu down.
Mm.
And honestly, it perfectly sets up the transition to the paradox we introduced at the very beginning of this deep dive.
Yes. Let's look at slide 8. We are circling all the way back to the hook.
To the paper equality.
Right. We have established 3 things. Tuvalu has a hidden male health crisis. It has a highly educated population, and it has a massive, stifling economic struggle. So how does a country with these specific dynamics get a 0.969, an absolute A grade, on the Gender Development Index?
This is where we look at the radar chart on slide 8. To understand the illusion, we have to look at how composite indices are mathematically constructed.
Right, how the math actually works.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is like evaluating the safety of a car by averaging the quality of its brakes, its airbags, and its steering wheel.
Okay.
If the airbags deploy perfectly and the steering wheel is incredibly responsive, but the brakes are completely missing,
Oh, no.
the average safety score of those 3 components might still look like a passing grade.
Because the great steering wheel pulls up the terrible brakes.
Right, the math averages out the extremes. But if you actually try to drive that car,
You were going to crash into a wall.
exactly, the index mathematically obscures the fatal flaw.
That is a brilliant analogy. Okay, so let's look at the breaks of the Gender Development Index. The GDI basically just compares the HDI of women to the HDI of men, right?
Yes. If the scores are perfectly identical, the GDI is 1.0. Tuvalu is at 0.969, which is incredibly close to perfect parity.
Almost identical. But how does it get there?
It is artificially inflated by the other 2 dimensions.
Health and education.
Exactly. Remember the health data from earlier. Tuvaluan women outlive men by 7 years.
Right.
Because the index treats female longevity as a positive metric for gender development, that massive 7-year gap gives women a huge mathematical advantage in the health dimension of the index.
It scores them really high, and then in the education dimension, they're basically tied. Both men and women are getting those 12-plus years of schooling.
Right. So women are way ahead mathematically in health and tied in education.
Okay, but what about the income?
This is where the radar chart on slide 8 draws that big red circle. When we isolate the income dimension, the actual economic reality, a massive, gaping structural inequality emerges.
The numbers are shocking.
In Tuvalu, the men's gross national income per capita is $8,956. The women's GNI per capita is only $4,962.
Let me just say that again. Men are making nearly double what women make.
Yes.
They're making almost twice as much money.
Yes, they are. But because the women live so much longer than the men, the index averages it all out. The lifespan advantage mathematically cancels out the severe income disadvantage in the final composite score.
So a high composite score can completely camouflage severe localized inequalities.
Absolutely. It creates a highly dangerous paper equality.
Paper equality, that is exactly what it is. And I feel like it is incredibly dangerous because international NGOs, global analysts, policymakers, they might just look at that 0.969 score, check a box that says gender equality achieved in Tuvalu, and route their funding and their attention elsewhere.
That is the real-world consequence of a flawed metric. They mistake the mathematical average for actual lived equality.
Which brings us to slide 9, because if we can't rely solely on the GDI, we need a metric that doesn't let you hide behind lifespan averages.
And that is the Gender Inequality Index, or GII.
Right. And the GII specifically measures reproductive health, structural empowerment, and the labor market.
Yes. And this is where the truth finally undeniably surfaces in the research you compiled.
Let's look at structural empowerment, specifically the share of parliamentary seats held by women.
This is the political zero zone we talked about at the very top of the deep dive.
Slide 9 has this step chart, and it contrasts the global average with Tuvalu. The global average for female parliamentary seats in 2023 is 26.5%.
Which honestly is still a very low number globally. It represents significant underrepresentation worldwide.
True, 26.5% is not great, but Tuvalu sits at a dismal 6.25%.
Yeah, incredibly low.
And the craziest part is that 6.25% is actually an improvement.
Sadly, yes.
If you look at the historical data on the chart, the presentation highlights it with this gray shaded area. The line simply flatlines at the absolute bottom of the axis. From 1999 to 2010, an entire decade passed without a single woman in parliament.
The structural barrier to political power for women in Tuvalu was absolute.
Think about what that means in the context of everything we've discussed. You have a female population that is educated to the exact same level as the male population.
Right.
They are spending 12 years in schools. But when it comes time to govern, to make decisions about the future of their sinking island, they are completely locked out of the room.
The education is completely failing to translate into political capital.
So they have paper equality, they have the education, but they have virtually no voice in making the laws.
None.
And if you think that's bad, we move to the final slide. Slide 10. The labor market data points to an even more alarming trend.
It's deeply concerning.
Because while the whole world has been running campaigns to push for greater female workforce participation for decades, Tuvalu is actually going in reverse.
The slide uses a slope graph to make this visually immediate. In the year 2000, 47.69% of Tuvaluan women over the age of 15 were in the labor force.
Almost half.
Right. But by 2023, that number had plummeted to 35.22%.
That is a massive drop, over 12 percentage points. Now, to be fair, the presentation does note that male participation also dipped slightly over that time, but it still remains significantly higher at 52.41%.
The gap is widening, and the overall participation for women is sinking.
But this is where the logic completely breaks down for me. If women are getting educated at the exact same rate as men,
Yep.
remember, they have over 12 years of expected schooling.
Yes.
Why are they vanishing from the workforce? Why are they less likely to be working now than they were 20 years ago?
It is a profound contradiction if you only look at the numbers. But it makes perfect sense when you consider the deep-seated cultural, structural, and geographic realities of a micro-island.
Okay, connect the dots for me.
Numbers alone cannot fix these barriers. Think about what happens in an environment with a stagnant, structurally limited economy.
Right, because the whole country only makes a third of the global income average.
Exactly. There are very, very few white-collar jobs that match the high level of education these women are receiving.
Because there's no major corporate sector.
Right. The economy is heavily reliant on subsistence agriculture, local fishing, and a very limited public sector, basically government jobs.
So informal jobs are that scarce.
Traditional cultural norms often reassert themselves with incredible force.
Meaning if there's only one job available, the culture dictates that it goes to the man.
Historically, yes. Men are culturally prioritized for the few available cash-earning jobs. But there's a much larger demographic force at play here, too, and it relates directly to the climate crisis.
Planetary pressures.
Yes. Tuvalu faces severe existential threats from rising sea levels. Because the local economy cannot support the population and the land is under threat, working-age men often migrate.
Ah, climate migration. They literally leave the island entirely.
Exactly. They migrate to places like New Zealand or Australia for seasonal work programs or permanent relocation. They become the primary breadwinners by leaving, and they send remittances back home.
Okay, so that creates a deeply skewed demographic reality on the island itself.
It does.
So the men leave to earn the cash in Australia or wherever, and who is left behind?
The women are left behind to manage the household. And that means they have to care for the elderly, they have to raise the children, they have to maintain the community structures, deal with a shrinking agriculture.
These are incredibly vital, exhausting roles, but they are entirely unpaid.
Exactly. This massive burden of unpaid domestic labor completely precludes them from entering the formal labor market, even if jobs were available.
They literally don't have the time.
And it certainly precludes them from having the time, the resources, or the cultural backing to run for political office.
Wow. So they are incredibly educated, but they are geographically trapped, economically sidelined, and politically silenced because the structural reality of their environment demands that they stay home while the men migrate for survival.
That is the reality.
And yet, because the men who happen to stay behind are dying 7 years younger from occupational hazards and poor diets, the UN scorecard averages it all out and hands them an A grade in gender development.
It is a profound paradox. And it shows exactly how a standardized metric can fail to capture the human reality of a unique environment.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We have taken quite a journey through this presentation you provided.
It's been incredibly revealing.
We started with a shiny, high-quality score, a 0.969, but as we peeled back the layers of the data and looked at the actual mechanisms of life on a micro-island,
We discovered a nation struggling with severe economic disparity, making only a third of the global average.
Right. We uncovered a hidden male health crisis driven by isolation and imported diets.
And we hit a severe structural barrier for women who are highly educated but have virtually no political voice and are systematically disappearing from the workforce.
Due to the pressures of climate migration and a stagnant economy.
The core lesson here is that standardized global metrics are blunt instruments. We absolutely need them for macro comparisons. They let us track global progress, like that massive leap in human development since 1990. They give us a baseline.
But when you apply these blunt instruments to unique, highly specific environments, like a Pacific microisland, they can generate statistical illusions.
They measure the shadows on the wall, not the shape of the room. We have to be willing to read between the lines, to look at the individual dimensions of health, education, and income, rather than just accepting the composite score at face value.
It is a stark reminder not to take a dashboard graphic as the whole truth, which leaves you with a final, lingering question to ponder long after this deep dive ends.
And it's an important one.
If our current global scorecards can hand out a near-perfect gender equality score to a country where women make half the money and have essentially zero political power, what invisible inequalities are hiding in the high scores of your own life?
In your own company's performance reviews.
Or your own country's economic reports? What biases and blind spots are baked into the metrics we use every day? Are we optimizing our societies to actually fix problems, or are we just optimizing them to pass the test?